welcome to our next edition of Title IX Spotlight. We only have a few weeks left before the 50th anniversary of Title IX is here on June 23rd, and we've covered a lot of the history. We've talked a little bit about the future, a little bit about the present, but there's also kind of a second phase of Title IX, if you will, or on a lot of people's minds anyway, this idea of gender equity, the quest for that, and it comes in a lot of shapes and forms. And one way that we've seen this in the last few years, months, a lot of different things come to the forefront is in coaching contracts and salaries and a lot of different aspects. And we're going to talk a little bit with Samantha Ekstrand, our favorite lawyer, if there is such a thing, NFCA legal counsel, one of our favorites. Samantha, this is a hodgepodge of things. I know that you have no forewarning of questions or topics. That's why we love you. We're going to get started a little bit, though, on just Title IX and what it means to you. So let's start with that. When you hear it, what do you think of?
I'm grateful for Title IX. I think we wouldn't be here without it. I look back at those early years, that we've heard about from, our veteran coaches, and just the opportunity to compete and participate and be supported, in the university setting, the college setting. Title IX is imperfect, and I realize that, and I see its limitations, almost daily. But I'm glad we have it, and I'm thrilled to be celebrating its, we'll call it its birthday, right? Its anniversary at the end of the month.
It is, and one thing that you and I had the honor, privilege, task, whatever it is, of being a part of was this Kaplan report that came out not too long ago, talking about a lot of the NCAA issues. And it's a big document, phases, and but take your best shot at summarizing that whole process. What was that like for you? And what do you think it was like for all of the sports? You worked with several when it came to explaining truly what was going on in collegiate sport and in that landscape when it comes to gender equity.
Last summer was a big moment, and it certainly started off by that social media post of the yoga mats and the dumbbells and the women's basketball tournament. I think every woman who has played or coached, in NCAA athletics and in the tournament realizes that we do not have gender equity, that the women's tournaments are run on smaller budgets, on tighter budgets with fewer frills, and in that fundamentally the student athlete experience, which is certainly the hot button phrase, is different for women's sports, women's teams in that setting. We've known it, we've lived it, we've dealt with it, we've tried to advocate through our committees, the championship committee for each sport, and often the answer is no, we can't do that, we'll look into it. A lot of the issues that we've raised, and one of our own coaches in that process said it, these are not new. We've been raising them and talking about them for years, but we had a moment, right? And that's what happens in history, especially with big social change, where, we got the country's attention, that there was great disparity, and it was based on gender. And so the NCAA, and I commend them for this, hired an outside law firm out of New York, who spent a lot of time collecting data. And the phases are, phase one is all basketball, phase two is the rest of us. And so you and I, got to really work together and collaborate on preparing what were softball's issues, gender equity issues in the tournament. The reports that they published are worth the read. I know that they are long, but they are well written, divided by sport, divided by issue. And what I love about it is that there's the data, like they got their hands, on it. And we have the numbers that show the dollar differentials in terms of what is spent on all different aspects of the tournament. And so there it is in black and white, and it's public, it's up on the website, and we all, can see it and refer to it. And I think we can all recognize that we've seen the change. We have had positive changes on the equity front since that report was published. Is there still work to do? Yes. But we are breaking through, the marketing and the travel and the schedule, right? I mean, that was softball's big issue, was all the games were kind of condensed into a shorter time frame. And so was thrilled to be a part of it. It was an honor. I really give a lot of credit to, that law firm and the attorneys that worked on that, because they sifted through an extraordinary amount of data in a short time, condensed it, put it out in a report that is readable. But, every coach in America, male or female, should be reading that report and be aware on the men's side, and then be informed on the women's side and keep advocating and have your athletes read it too. And I know a lot of our coaches did that. And I think that was, well worth the time, because their student athlete voice, we know, is very powerful.
One thing that you said, that there's the numbers and there's the data, and something that we're starting to see a little bit more of is the salary numbers and the data that comes with salaries for our female coaches compared to, our counterparts with baseball, or really whatever it is. It can be any sport, but baseball is so easy, to compare, for lack of a better reason. You work in this landscape a lot and in this area a lot. What are some of the things you're seeing now with salaries that in contracts that maybe is surprising to you, the positive and the negative?
Sure. So I was just on an EEOC interview this morning. So that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that regulates Title VII, which is a cousin of Title IX. It really is similar in that you cannot discriminate based on gender. And, this coach is going through this process, and the school fired back, and their response was, you can't compare baseball and softball. And very respectfully and adamantly, yes, we can. And yes, we should, because, in terms of a job, our coaches are doing fundamentally the same thing. Could baseball's roster sizes be a little bit bigger? Yes. Are those extra 10 kids worth $100,000 in a salary differential? No, they're not. We have the same games. We have the same positions. You have a hitting coach and a pitching coach and all of these responsibilities. And I think where we are really trying to break out of, this kind of straitjacket that we've been put on, is that we can only be compared with softball, and softball are the programs in the conference. This was their argument this morning. You need to look at where are you in your conference? Well, look, if we are only looking within our own gender-based market, we will never close this gap with baseball. And so we are pushing back. I'm pushing back with each conversation I have with coaches, on that comparison, because the baseball salary market is significantly higher in almost all conferences and all divisions than the softball market. But we have made strides. We, each of these conversations that we have in negotiating salaries, and closing that gap step by step, I think is a positive. I think our coaches feel more empowered, to have these conversations. They are hard to have. They're hard to be in that seat across from the athletic director and say, look, I'm doing a great job, and I think I deserve more. I know I deserve more. And my counterpart down the hall is being paid significantly more. And so I'm thrilled at those moments, when they come back and they say, I did it, I did it. And I got a $10,000 raise, or I made this jump in my base salary, or in the benefits, or, in any of the different kind of compensation buckets that athletic directors, have. And so I do see progress, but the gap exists. And I think that we need to escape the trap of not defining our market as just a softball market, as a gender market. But we do have some of our high profile Division I coaches, making great salaries and getting great contracts. And that's super exciting, because they are definitely kind of raising that ceiling. And that helps, the whole softball collegiate community on the salary front.
For sure. You see Lonnie Alameda just signs a new contract, right? And does some great things. And obviously everybody knows Coach Gasso's history with salaries and contracts, and Coach Walton, and, Coach Hutchins, and there's so many of them. But back to the market, I'm curious on this. Is it just going to take a willing AD to say, this is how we will define the market? I mean, what will it take, and how can a coach help understand? Because it just seems very trivial. I get to pick whatever market I want to look at to make that argument.
I think we have to tie it back, to our good friend we're talking about, Title IX, that you cannot discriminate based on gender. And so when you define a market by gender, there's the problem. I think there's the violation. And so I think it's trying to just, break through that, that wall of rationale, like we have to keep them separate, and it's not a sport by sport comparison, I understand that very technically in some of the court's interpretations of Title IX, they say it cannot just be tit for tat and this and that, and go down and have everything be exactly equal, but it needs to be equitable. And that's, that's a cousin of equal, right? Equitable is substantially the same, equivalent, comparable, right? So what is it going to take? Ultimately, I think a lot of conversations, to break through. I've seen it. I've seen athletic directors say, you know what, you're right. It is substantively the same job. I think where they get hung up is that, my gosh, the baseball market in some areas is so high, they get worried, like they don't have the funds to close that gap. And so they have to hold on to the old framework. Ultimately, do we need a lawsuit like we had in women's soccer? Maybe. In women's soccer, the U.S. women's national soccer team that filed the lawsuit, that was under the Equal Pay Act. So that was different than Title IX. Both are, again, kind of cover the same ground. You have to treat men and women, equitably and cannot pay them differently. They settled, so we didn't get the precedent, but we have the example. So it's not legally binding across the land. It was not like a Supreme Court decision that everybody has to follow, but it certainly was a big statement and a breakthrough on the salary front, not in the college market, in the professional market, but the concept is stop paying men and women different amounts based on their gender. Just stop.
So what tips would you give right now? We're in that time of year where people are taking new jobs and they're talking to athletic directors after maybe a great year. What are the tips that you would give to push this envelope a little bit for the coaches who are able? We're not all able in different markets or results, whatever that might be. But for someone who really feels like they have the leverage or the legs to stand on, what are some of the keywords? What are some of the phrases? And maybe both sides, the do's and the don'ts.
So I'd love to talk to you. If you're negotiating your contract, sign up, get on my calendar. If you're an NFCA member, it's a member benefit, so it won't cost you a dime. You need to be informed if you're accepting a job. This is an important moment in your professional career, right? Whether it's the first offer or whether you're renegotiating. What I see that are the don'ts is people get so excited that they say, yes, I accept. And then out goes your leverage. The window closes, right? So there is a moment where you can be excited about an offer, excited about a new job, and show that excitement, but still negotiate the terms and even more importantly and fundamentally understand them, right? Understand the agreement, whether it is just a verbal agreement and you have to understand what it means to be at will, or whether there's a written agreement. That is a very important moment. So be informed, do your homework in terms of what is a salary market. So as I'm talking about like trying to break through and out of the confines of a gender-based market, we still need to know what it is, because we have to talk the language, that the AD is talking and know, the points of reference. Sometimes that's hard in private school settings as to what really is the market. But we do have a salary survey and we're going to be getting one out real soon, as I finish those edits that you sent me. So we do have some data, some conferences share information. So we want to have a sense of the softball market. We want a sense of the athletic department market, the cost of living, your region, your conference, your job responsibilities, to understand kind of what's a fair and reasonable expectation for a salary here, and be comfortable and confident with having that conversation with the person who's hiring you. That these are my financial goals with this move. This was my, base salary expectation. Can we discuss it before getting super excited and saying yes? And then it's hard to revisit it after that moment. It's kind of like the clock did strike midnight and it's gone. But I think these are big, exciting moments. And I want coaches to feel informed, confident, and empowered to have good conversations about it.
All right, and last question. What do you think are things that maybe our coaches dismiss because it's always been that way, or they should be lucky to feel that they have this opportunity, or that just isn't true? Like what are those key points that you think, coaches need to be more aware of instead of just accepting the status quo as we've known it for more than 50 years now?
And that's a big question, Joanna. I think the Kaplan report honestly opened our eyes, and sometimes we don't know what we don't know, but that report did, at least in the tournament setting, peel back and say, wow, there's just a lot more going on, down the hall or in these other programs. So I think it's important to, be aware and have the conversations and not just accept that this is the travel budget or this is the recruiting budget, or we can't do this, or, we can't go here, we can't order new uniforms, or, I'm asking for too much. I do think that there is kind of an equilibrium of realizing we cannot say, well, this is how it's always been, or we're going to war and it's everything or else, and these, this setting that you're in, the athletic department with your athletic leadership, that's your workplace environment, right? There's a culture there. there are relationships there that you want to build and foster, so that, there's, you can have hard conversations and be asking for things, but not also be, tabbed as a complainer or so demanding. I think a lot has to do with tone, has to do with timing, has to do with credibility, being able to establish yourself as a team player within the department, but not always just accepting things as is, like this is as good as it gets. I think the biggest challenge that our coaches see that I don't have an easy answer for is the facilities question, right? When you have, let's say, a baseball program that has, an incredible facility, and then you are, piecemealing, dragging your own field, draining your dugouts because they, get underwater. Like, what do we do with that? I think that those capital improvements or capital projects are big conversations that you need to have probably before you accept a job, if possible. And then, throughout your tenure. And I've even heard a lot this week, just, well, this is what we talked about, and 10 years has gone by and nothing has happened. My advice is you need to keep that conversation alive and be part of the solution. What is it? What will it take? What do we need to do to get, to improve our facility, to build a new one, to do whatever we need to do, again, to create a positive playing atmosphere for our student athletes.
Thank you very much, Samantha. This has been fun. Just a short snippet. We have a lot more of these conversations on other archives that you can access, and you can see a lot of different things. And this will continue as we keep pushing forward and bringing you coverage of Title IX, not just what it was like for our coaches in those early years of the legislation, but what it's like now, and the responsibility that we have, the current generation, to continue pushing forward and mandating that all of these mandates have been issued and will be followed, and trying to do that in the best way we can. So join us next week. We'll be back with some more highlights from some of our coaches that you will recognize from the Hall of Fame and various entities. But if there's anything you want to know about Title IX, anything more that you feel we can bring you, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. But Samantha, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, even coming to you from a parking lot. I appreciate your time.